What if you had instant analytics on your PDP images and a faster way to create content that performs better? That's what we're diving into in today's episode, how top brands and retailers are using analytics and automation to stay ahead across retail media and the digital shelf. It's Rapid helps teams scale smarter. They analyze image performance, they help you create optimized assets for retail media networks and the digital shelf, and they integrate directly with PIM and DAM systems for seamless execution. Brands like Pepsi, Mondelez, and Instacart use its Rapid to go beyond basic tools to uncover gaps in PDP and retail media performance by analyzing the images themselves, not just the count. Streamline banner creation across hundreds of formats for Amazon Ads, Walmart Connect, and other retail and social platforms, and launch high-performing content more than 80% faster across e-commerce and marketing channels. If you're buried in manual work or struggling to keep up, this episode and It's Rapid will show you a better way. Visit itsrapid.ai to learn more.
Welcome to Beyond the Shelf with Dave Feinlieb. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. We publish new episodes every Tuesday morning, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's your host, Dave Feinlieb.
Welcome back to Beyond the Shelf. Today we're joined by Paco Underhill, the retail anthropologist behind Why We Buy and the founder of EnviroCell. Paco has spent decades studying real shopper behaviors to help companies design better in-store and now online experiences. In a recent profile, Paco warns that in our age of distraction, digital tools are distancing us from the human connections that truly matter in retail. He reminds us that insight comes from observation and presence, like wearing down the soles of your shoes to understand your customers. Today, we'll connect those lessons to creative execution on the digital shelf, AI's role in retail, and how to rehumanize commerce in an automated world. Paco, welcome to the show.
David, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. I'd love to start out by having you take us back. You grew up in the diplomatic corps. How did that influence your career?
Well, David, it is a life that I wouldn't exchange with anyone, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone either. Growing up, we moved on average, every 18 months.
Wow.
Changing countries, languages. I had a terrible stutter, which I still have the remnants of now. But part of what I had to do back then was often to look as a way of being able to understand where I was and what the rules were.
Right.
And I think I have taken that coping mechanism for handicap and I turned it into a profession.
I love it. Now, you also mentioned when we were getting to know each other a little bit that you were a refugee from the world of academia. Tell us what that means.
Well, some 40 years ago, I was a poor part-time adjunct instructor in a doctoral program in environmental psychology. And I was struggling to be able to, find my way in the world and pay my rent and do all of the other things. And when I stepped off into the world of commercial research as opposed to academic research, part of the rules were so different, okay? Meaning that people weren't worried about what's the size of your sample,
Right.
They were concerned is what do we get on the other side of it? And one of the things that was really eye-opening to me is doing my first work for Citibank and looking at the installation of ATMs and realizing that I could walk into almost any space and be able to often make some very simple, modest changes that had an immediate effect. I can remember a branch manager yelling at me going, "Mr. Underhill, you moved the brochure rack and you got rid of a month's worth of brochures in 3 days. And I went, well, isn't that the purpose of the brochure rack, to get brochures into circulation? I figured out people were much more likely to pick it up on the way out than on the way in, which is, if you think about it in terms of how we relate to a retail bank, it makes perfect sense. And that is still true today, meaning that I can go into almost any retail space and often go, let's move this mirror, and it makes an immediate difference.
Now, was this kind of the epiphany moment for you in kind of doing this sort of work commercially?
It made me realize something here, which is that I had spent an enormous amount of time knocking on doors and largely failing. I had never taken a business course. I'd never taken a marketing course. I'd never worked in retail.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many things that I was completely ignorant about. But all I needed was that first chance, because as soon as I got in the door and as soon as I came back, all of a sudden, people were calling me rather than me trying to knock on doors.
Tell us how the business has evolved since then.
Well, we started off as a testing agency for banks, and then we moved from banks to record stores and bookstores. And then I made friends with the woman who was the head of store planning at Filene's in Boston, who introduced me to her friend who was the director of retail planning at Bloomingdale's. And that was, again, that opened doors. And one thing led to another. And before we knew it, we had done our first work offshore. I opened my first office in Milan, in Italy. We were working for Levi's Italia because we'd worked for Levi's in San Francisco. They'd heard about us, and before long, I realized that, based on my upbringing, I was very comfortable working and reaching out, across the world. So, at our peak, I think we had 10 offices, and we had worked in 53 different countries.
What a great story, from leveraging the kind of opportunity, the diplomatic core, and having an impact, and then expanding the business. Now, tell us about Why We Buy. This book is legendary. How did you come up with the idea for it?
Here is my story. I had just moved into a brand new office, okay? And I was settling in, we were moving, whatever. And this very petite man walks in the door and says, "My name is Malcolm. I used to work for the Washington Post. I'm here. I've moved to New York City, and I have an assignment from the New Yorker magazine. And they said maybe I should come talk to you." And after the second visit, I had to pick up the phone and call the New Yorker and say, "Does Malcolm Gladwell work for you?"
Wow, amazing.
And then in the spring of 1996, the story, The Science of Shopping, came out in the New Yorker magazine and was the most reprinted piece in New Yorker history. So up until that point, I'd been writing columns, I'd been trying to find agents, but as soon as that came out, the agents were knocking on my door.
Why We Buy, will you kind of give us the story on the research and some of the insights that we can take from the book?
Well, by the time the book was written, we had been working all over the world. We'd worked across the world of retail. We'd moved from retail to do work at some airports, train stations, and starting to do some work online. And part of what I recognized is that there are biological constants. There are the things that don't change. 90% of us, David, are right-handed, and that's not something that's going to change. our eyes age in the same way. The way someone sees at age 30 and the way someone sees at age 60 are predictably different. Okay. Um, but part of what makes retail in any form, physical, online, whatever, interesting is that what made a good store in 2000 and what makes a good store in 2025 are different, and they're a reflection of both cultural evolution, but the evolution of us. Okay? So, and there are 6 things that we talk about here. One is particularly today, the line between the physical and cyber world is fuzzier and fuzzier. Okay, meaning that you walk into a Costco or whatever, the number of people walking around with their phone in their hands, and there's some issues there. Second is the evolution of gender, and I think this has been a very interesting topic here. And it is one that I can talk about it from the standpoint of economics, that making the world female friendly from the standpoint of design and management has a direct impact on success. But we also have to recognize that there's an evolution of gender here, because we have uncoupled sex from procreation. And I think there's a certain degree of liberation there that is changing how we do what we do. So that's 2. The third is the role of generations, meaning that this was historically the biggest difference was between men and women. And today, while that difference still exists, there's some very distinct differences between you and your children here. And that is, reflective of the world that you and I grew up in versus the world that they are growing up in. Fourth issue is the issue of time. And this is particularly in a post-COVID world. That issue of time is poignant, because whether I'm watching somebody shop in a physical world or watching someone shop in a digital world, you can almost tell how loudly the clock is ticking inside someone's head. And therefore, time has an influence on choices.
Yeah.
The fifth issue is what is global and what's local, meaning that what happens in El Paso, Texas, and what happens in Duluth, Minnesota, much less Albany, New York, or San Francisco, have some predictable differences too, and we need to be responsive to it. And then the final one is the issue of wealth or money.
And you've developed these kind of 6 aspects or keys you've developed over the years as part of your research and your work.
So, part of what we did is to use both motion picture cameras and then video cameras, observers, and then being able to talk to people. And when I stepped off into the world of commercial research and found that almost all research was done based on surveys or focus groups, and I knew as an environmental psychologist that what people say and what they do is often different. So part of what we specialized in is using different techniques and then looking at what's the same and what is different, and recognizing that form of synthesis was part of what our skill set was.
Now, I know a lot of people would like to write a book in their lives. How did you go about it? Did you sit down every week? Did it come to you naturally? What was the process?
Well, David, growing up in third world countries, we had no TV.
Mm.
I was a dedicated reader. I can remember probably the summer of third grade. My grandfather was reading a book to me, and I was so frustrated because it was so slow.
Yeah.
And I ripped that book out of his hands and took it off and read it myself. So, and books have books have been part of my life here.
Now, you've said stores are like stages. What does that mean, first of all? And then how or does it translate into the digital world?
Well, if you think of it, stores are about. Est-ce que vous parlez français?
Only a little bit.
Well, there's a wonderful expression in French, which is je vous propose.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of what retail is about, from the standpoint of design, visual merchandising, store layout, is being able to say, take a look.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's very poignant about both physical and digital is the difference between someone who's coming in for the first time and someone who's coming in for the 122nd time. And, one of the things that's poignant, particularly in the digital world, is I can go to an Estee Lauder site and go, my 23-year-old has been to that site hundreds of times since she was a teenager, but how much has she actually bought? Versus a 50-year-old woman who's coming to that site for the first time, whose budget for health and beauty aids is significantly different. And how do we understand the way she sees versus the way my daughter sees?
This episode of Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Mondelez, Instacart, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai.
Will you tell us about your Forbes article? You talk about sort of losing human connection in a digital world. First of all, spend a moment on that, if you would, and then how can brands reconnect with shoppers?
Well, I think one of the things that we're looking at is there a way to be able to go to the shopper as opposed to expecting the shopper to come to you? And I think this is one of the things which we have seen happen in other parts of the world. But is there a way, for example, for the supermarket to come to you? If you think about the farmers market, okay, and is there something that you could go to at the farmers market and go, I've never had that vegetable before. Boy, it looks good. Can you tell me how to cook it? I mean, those are things that sort of start the conversation going and help us to be able to rationalize.
Makes sense. Talk about retail media, digital advertising. How has that evolved? And what role do you see creative playing when it comes to different forms of content that retailers or brands are putting in front of the shopper now?
Well, I think one of the things that is interesting is that 20th century marketing was about, broadcasting down. And 21st century is not only about coming down, but it's also about bubbling up. And that is there a way of being able to help connect the people who believe in you to your potential buyer? Can I give you an example?
Please.
Okay. The average time in a women's dressing room is up by almost 20% from 15 years ago. And part of it is because inside the dressing room, they're using their phones and FaceTime to be able to call their friends, their mother, their whatever, and go, do you like what I have on? Okay.
Right.
Part of what that means is that often if you put a logo or you stage the dressing room, that videotape, that picture gets put up on social media, which is advertising you can't buy.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is it is things like that. We often, in the world of retail, talk about, what the role of a parking lot for two-legged pets is. Do you know what a two-legged pet is?
Tell me more.
Oh, come on now, bro.
Yeah,
Yeah, we are both two-legged pets.
I got it.
It is, husbands and boyfriends.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there is a direct relationship, for example, in lingerie.
Uh-huh.
If there's a place for you to park your boyfriend or your husband, you spend more time and you spend more money.
Right. Two-legged pets. I like it. This is it's great. AI obviously has been a big part of the conversation the last few years. It's
Yes.
everywhere in the news. How are you seeing that play into the work that you do?
Well, I can remember David in probably 1999
Yeah.
getting up at an internet conference in New York City and talking about all of the ways in which the internet in 1999 was destined to fail. It was Silicon Alley geeks designing for Silicon Alley geeks. Okay? And I think we're dealing in the world of AI. We're dealing with a very similar issue today, meaning that there's some things that AI is magnificent for. I am using it, for example, to do editing on columns and a number of different things. But I also, if I go back to that female issue, is my wife goes shopping for herself, but she also shops for me. She shops for her children. She shops for her mother and father. Okay. And the decision making process that goes into all of those things are different and isn't something that you can pick up necessarily with AI. And I think this, that issue of gender and AI is a very interesting one. And I think part of what this means is that AI's level of usefulness in some areas is just awesome. And in some areas it is interesting but not conclusive.
Now, do you think it'll evolve to the point where it is conclusive, or there may just be areas where we apply tons of AI and there are areas where we need to apply judgment?
Both. I think both of those things are true.
Yeah. Tell us about you. You have a whole series of these. Why we buy. You have famously How We Eat, the brave new world of food and drink. Tell us about that one.
Well, that book was in progress when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, my business world collapsed. Okay. Obviously, people weren't testing prototype stores. We were doing maybe a third of our work in China. That just completely shut down. And I had to look at myself in the mirror and go, what am I going to do? And what should I do? And I realized that I shouldn't be writing for businesses. I should be writing for people. And that given the fact that I'd worked on food and grocery and bars and restaurants all over the planet, that I knew a lot about how we consume. And I decided that maybe it was time for me to both work on a book for the public, but also to work on me.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened, David?
Tell me.
I lost 30 pounds. I threw out the book, the book that had been written for business, and
Yeah.
started writing it for people and started to take my own advice. I lost weight. My blood pressure went down. My cholesterol went down. And at 73, at my last physical, the doctor looked at me and said, Mr. Underhill, you're in the 96th percentile of your age here.
uh,
I went, well, how do I get to 98?
right.
But still, it
It's
was,
amazing. It's a fantastic story. It's
yeah.
amazing.
So this is what, and the audio version of it, I don't think it is now, but it was on the Amazon bestseller list.
Amazing. Yeah, a great story from a literary perspective, but also personal inspiration.
And I've I've continued in that same vein. Does it mean that, the range of my diet, meaning that I eat a lot less meat than I used to? I'm much more careful about sugar. I eat more fruit and drink less juice. Um, I'm I'm conscious. I'm aware that when I walk into the supermarket where I live in Connecticut in February, do you know where the freshest fruits and vegetables are?
Where?
In the freezer. They're in the freezers.
Got it.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
just simple stuff like that, which is, and
But it makes a big difference.
it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of travel, you've also done some work with airports and kind of the evolution of airports. We've all walked through an airport and been in a hurry to get to a flight, something like that. We've also all probably had time in an airport. What's going on there? What's new and what's different?
Well, if you think of it, the origins of airport design are based on airplanes. Okay. Meaning that I need to get this plane in, I need to get it out, I need to get multiple planes in and multiple planes out.
They don't exactly turn on a dime.
They don't turn on a dime. That's one thing. Second is that airports have been profoundly affected by security issues, meaning that there's checkpoint Charlie in it, and what happens on one side of that fence and what happens on the other side of that fence are different. And then the other aspect to it is that the number of people traveling and the economic status of many of those people traveling are radically different than they were 20 years ago. So you go to an airport in Dubai, yeah, and there are all of the migrant workers flying in from the Philippines, Indonesia to their construction jobs here. All right. So part of what we're looking at is airports are struggling to deal with the experienced traveler and the novice traveler.
Hmm.
I can remember working on Logan, the international terminal at Logan. And as you probably know, Massachusetts has a significant Portuguese population,
Okay.
and they have a significant number of people who come from the Azores. So, do those people fly every week? No. Do they fly every month? No. Do they fly even every year? But they do fly periodically. Okay. And you can watch somebody at an airport and often be able to make a judgment as to, is that an experienced traveler or is that a novice traveler? And for those of us who are experienced travelers, the fact that we have to wind our way through all of those amateurs who don't know what the hell they're doing or where they're going or how much time it's going to take, or the fact that I'm in a hurry because I need to change planes is different. And boy, if that issue is poignant at Logan Airport in Boston, it's even more poignant at the Dubai airport in the UAE.
Yeah, it's such a great insight, and I feel like it applies to so many areas. Product design, I've got my new users, I've got my experienced users, and they all have a different expectation and understanding of what that experience is going to be like. So,
True.
tell us what's on the docket. What are you looking at for the second half of this year, and what's coming up next?
Well, David, I am semi-retired now. Okay, I'm 73. This is my studio office here. I do have another home. I am trying to take on virtuous projects. So I've been working for the Western National Park Association. So I just finished reporting on Carlsbad Cavern and White Sands in New Mexico. I will be in Alaska in 10 days, and I will go visit a couple of parks there.
Exciting destinations, great work. One last question, and I've got our rapid rundown for you. What insight for our e-commerce focused listeners? What insight can they kind of take away or carry forward from all the research that you've done?
I think this is a very critical issue. If you're Abercrombie and Fitch, you know who your target market is. Okay. But if you're Costco.com or you're whatever, and you're trying to appeal to a broad cross section, one of the things which I recognize is I can often go to a website and tell you what the age of the designer is, because they tend to design for themselves. And I think one of the key aspects to web in the future is being able to understand what's the difference in age. As we age, the lenses in our eyes yellow, and the way I see color at 73 and the way someone sees color at 33 is different. If I'm in Brazil, who has more money versus if I'm in Connecticut, who has more money. So I think some of those issues of understanding perception from the standpoint of who your existing and potential customer are, that's one. Second is dealing with time issues. Okay. Third is recognizing that there's some form of evolution that is very critical. And that the way somebody interacts with you on the phone versus on the screen can be different.
Well, it's time for our rapid rundown. A few quick questions. Your favorite store experience that took you by surprise?
When I was probably 8 years old, we were living in Warsaw, Poland. It was behind the Iron Curtain. Warsaw was still dealing with being 98% leveled during the Second World War. And I can remember my parents taking me to Munich, Germany. We drove there through the Iron Curtain, whatever. And I can remember going to a PX and it blew my socks off. And I went everywhere in that PX. That was one. The second was growing up in third world countries. My perception of being an American was influenced by the Sears and Roebuck catalog.
Had everything in it.
It had everything in it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just toys that I looked at everything.
You mentioned the 6 things that are changing, the sort of 6 tenets to think about. Will you take a moment and talk about this concept of time? If I'm a brand and I want to be thoughtful about this constant clock ticking for my shoppers, what do I do about that? How should that factor into my work?
Why is the milk the farthest thing away from the front door at the grocery store? And that was based on the premise that in 1930, that the longer I held you and the more things I forced you to walk past, the more stuff you went. There's a grocery store that I just looked at in Westchester where right up front there's a fixture that says tonight's dinner. And there's a flesh, a starch, and vegetables right there. So that if someone wants to make a very shallow loop,
They can do it.
they can make a very shallow loop, knowing that the fact that they shop there once doesn't mean that they're always going to shop there, but when they need to, they will. I love that Walmart Canada often has a section that says your kid's lunchbox, which is everything organized in a way that made it easy for someone to be able to do it. And I think these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about in terms of time.
Paco, if our listeners want to reach you, what's the best way for them to do that?
PacoUnderhill.com.
All right. Paco Underhill, a legend in the space, legendary books. Pleasure talking with you. Thanks so much for doing this. And I hope you'll come back someday.
Bake a cake, Jake. I'll meet you at the lake.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of Beyond the Shelf. If you enjoy the show, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. It really helps us grow. And feel free to share us with your colleagues so they too can hear weekly perspectives from the brightest minds in e-commerce. You can also check us out on LinkedIn, where we post clips from each episode, share Dave's takes on breaking industry news, and much more. Beyond the Shelf is a production of It's Rapid. Our host is Dave Feinlieb, and our producers are Sean Levy-Ashvili and Jake Musiker. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.